Okay, so continuing on, talking about the French and Indian War, or the lead up. We're on page 160. We will be once I set this. 160. Desmond. All right, so here we go. The war is going to start. And you will hear a name in this lesson of someone I bet you've heard of before. Here we go. The French and Indian War. By 1753, the problems between the British and French had worsened. In that year, a young British officer named, who is it? George Washington. We've heard of him. He delivered a message to the French asking them to leave the valley. Do you think they said, sure, fine, we'll leave? Of course not. They worked hard to get that land, to claim it, to build their fort. They spent years building a fort. They're not going to just up and leave just because George Washington asked them to. Now, at this time, George Washington, he was just a young guy. He was a young British officer. He wasn't like famous or president or anything at this point. So he was just starting out as a young soldier. All right, moving on. The French refused, which we knew they would. A few months later, in 1754, all right, so a few months later is a new year, Washington returned with a small group of soldiers. So this time he brings backup with him, right? All right, they built Fort Necessity nearby, so they built their own fort close by, and from it they attacked Fort Duquesne. That was the French fort, Fort Duquesne. The British soldiers were quickly defeated. This was the first battle of the French and Indian War. All right, let's see. French and Indian War. Let's see if I can find a map of those.
Oh, it's Billy and Bob. Yeah, you don't like that name.
All right. Oh, good. Here's a map. All right. Look at this map. Let me pull it up bigger. Shh. So we can kind of get a picture. All right. So we have, here's Pennsylvania. Here's the Appalachian Mountains. Okay. So this was rough land. There was a lot of big hills, big mountains. Here's Fort Duquesne. That was the French fort. And then the British built Fort Necessity close by, and that was kind of like their camp or their base, and that's where they fought from. All right, back we go. Okay, if you go down to the bottom of your page, this is a timeline. All right, so it says complete the timeline by following the directions in each box. So here we go. Here's the first box. It says write a caption for this image. Find clues in the text at the top of the page. I don't think I can type on this because I'm not putting a text box in here. So, what do you think? What do you think this is a picture of? Something we just read about. Who do you think this guy on the horse is probably? Emma? There it is. There's George Washington. He's at the French fort giving the message saying, move out. All right. And if you look where the red line goes to, that is going to be 1750, 51, 52, 53. That was in 1753. All right. Let's go to this next box. I'm going to read this one. In 1755, British troops tried again to capture Fort Duquesne and were defeated again. More than 1,400 British troops were killed or wounded by the French and their Native American allies, the Wyandot. All right. Connect this box to the correct place on the timeline. So where would we connect it? What do we need to draw a line to? What year? Look here. It tells us 1755, right? So take your pencil or pen. Yeah, and draw a line From this box, boom, to 1755. So easy. Do that in your book. Draw a line from this box to 1755. Complete the timeline. All right, next box says, upset by the losses at Fort Duquesne, colonists urged British leader William Pitt to spend more money on the war. 3 years later, and with Pitt's support, the British captured Fort Duquesne. Now, once they captured Fort Duquesne, it took them 3 years, guys. It took them some time. All right, they renamed it Fort Pitt. Fort Pitt. Because William Pitt was part of that. He helped with that. So they named it after him. And does that make you think of any city that we have nowadays? Have you ever heard of a city that starts with Pitt?
Pennsylvania.
Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I bet if we looked at a map, I bet that's where Pittsburgh is. What do you think? Because it was Fort Pitt named after him. Now I'm curious. I want to find out. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania map. On a map. Oh, there's where it is. All right, so later on, Fort Pitt actually became city of Pittsburgh. It all started way back in 1754, 55, around that time. Yeah, that's cool. All right, let's move on to the next page in our book. We have one more page to read. No, the French did not win the war. No. We're on page 161 in our book. And here we go. All right, so what year is this? Look at the timeline. What year would this be? Nope. It's the dot. Thank you, Ollie. It's 59 because it's before 1760, right? It's one before it. After capturing Fort Duquesne, the British decided to drive the French out of Canada. All right, so now they've moved up into Canada and are fighting up there. In June 1759, British forces attacked Quebec. The city was located on steep cliffs above the St. Lawrence River. To carry out their surprise attack, British troops quietly climbed narrow paths up the cliffs at night. After 3 months of fighting, the French surrendered Quebec.
What?
Draw the soldiers climbing the cliffs. You can if you want. You don't have to. All right, so let's look that up. Canada, Quebec, and Montreal map. Here we go. Here's Canada, part of Canada. Where'd he go? Come back, Canada. There you are. We'll go to France. The Eiffel Tower, that would be. You know that's the city of romance where Paris is, so you gotta wait till you get your feller and then go there. All right. Right here. Here's Quebec. Here's Montreal. This is a better one. So up here in Canada, if you were to go down this river called the St. Lawrence River, you would come to Quebec along it, and you would also come to Montreal. Those are very big cities in Canada. They're still, and you know what? People there still speak French, even though they're not French anymore, but they still have French ancestors.
I used to have a Filipino mom.
Did you? Oh, that's so cool. All right, let's go on to the next, down here at the bottom. 1 year after the siege of Quebec, so what would 1 year after this be? This would be 1760, right? So you guys can draw a line from this box to 1760. 1 year after, the British captured Montreal. We just saw that on the map. It was just on down the river. They successfully forced the French from Canada. All right, box at the top. The war ended in North America with the fall of Montreal, but battles between the two countries continued in Europe for 3 more years. The war finally ended with the Treaty of Paris of 1763. Now this is important. You need to know what a treaty is, guys. A treaty is a peace agreement. So whenever two sides are finished fighting the war, they don't want to fight anymore, they make a treaty. And the treaty says basically who gets what. All right. Great Britain claimed all of France's colonies in North America. So remember that map that had the green on it? All that green is now red because it all belongs to Britain now. All right, France doesn't own anything over here at that point. All right. Unable to afford protection for the settlers in the Ohio Valley, Great Britain issued the Proclamation of 1763. This official announcement said settlers could not move past the Appalachian Mountains. It set this land aside for Native American groups. This action angered the colonists. All right, so let's picture that. Let me see. Let me go back to a map of the colonies. 159. Let me put this up bigger. So let's picture that. So all this that was green is now red because Britain basically won the war. They got all of France's land, but they had been fighting for 9 years. The French and Indian War took 9 years, guys, and the British were tired of fighting. Now, the French, they went home, but guess who still lived here? Native Americans still lived here, right? They didn't go anywhere. And so they were still kind of fighting. And the British were tired of fighting. They'd been fighting for 9 years. They needed a break. And so they came up with this idea. They thought it was a good idea. They said, hey guys, I know this is British land, but we're just going to make this proclamation of 1763. And we want all our British colonists just to stay over here. Don't go over here. Don't cross the mountains. All right? So we don't want to fight Native Americans because we're tired of fighting. Do you think the colonists liked that idea?
Yeah.
Well, if they didn't want to fight, they did. But it said that they didn't like it. Because think about it. If you're a colonist, you would be thinking, I just fought a war for 9 years so we could get this land, and now you're telling me I can't live here. I can't move here. Why? So see, they're mad about it. So that starts a whole another whole issue between Britain and now the colonists. So they're getting aggravated. All right, so why do they call it the French and Indian War? Who fought who? French and Indian War. You would think by the name of it, you would think the French fought the Indians, but that's not the case. Right? We learned, remember our map, you had the red and the green, right? The red side was Britain. Britain fought against who? The French. And usually the Indians were on the French side, except for a couple of exceptions. So that the French and Indian War was the British, who aren't even mentioned in the title, fought against the French and the Indians.
No, they're called French fries.
All right, so that is our lesson for today. We're going to stop there on that.